There is a town in northwest New Jersey without streetlights, where roads wind on and on through dense woods without a gas station for miles. The only places to stop to pee are bars full of people who have stories to tell. I don't live there, but I had a friend who did. He heard a story from someone at the bar and, as a result, dragged me and a few others into those woods. At the time, we were just high school kids. The bartenders in this town never checked ID, so few people came down those roads that bars would be nuts to refuse any customer, legal or otherwise. So my friend, we'll call him Michael, had no difficulty ordering drinks, probably just a cheap watery beer. He gets talking to a stranger. Michael described the guy as looking mostly normal, save for an ugly scar that ran from his jaws to his collarbone. They get started talking and, eventually, after a few drinks, the man starts bragging. He had lived in the town all his life and had a few stories about illegally hunting deer deep in the woods. Mainly, he hunted squirrels with a bow and arrow, sometimes shooting deer clean through their skulls, leaving them back home to skin and eat them. One time he went into a part of the woods he rarely ventured, accessible only on one road. I won't tell you the name of it. This stretch of asphalt went on for 4 or 5 miles through the deepest part of the woods. This man drove halfway through, pulled over, and got out to do some hunting. He told Michael that he must have walked for miles into the woods, but didn't once see a single deer, no squirrels, or no critters. The birds didn't chirp at all, and nor did the bugs cry. Just the reverberating silence of the forest. Even the wind blowing didn't disturb the pine needles or the leaves. He was about to turn back when he saw a stone building. The man described it as a crumbling castle tower. A lot of buildings in this place get abandoned. You see crackheads going in to make dens out of them and whatever. But nature overtakes them, and nature doesn't want us here. I think, once we leave, the forest just grows over our homes. The asphalt cracks and grass sprouts up. The walls crumble and plants sprout up in its place. I remember a tree growing out of the roof of one cracked den, uprooting the whole thing. The thing that struck me about this place, though, no plants grew near it. The earth looked blasted and raw. The soil looked dead and dried up around it. No grass sprouted on it, no moss, and no nothing. It was like nature didn't want any part of it. The man naturally went in, and I couldn't blame him. I mean, you see a castle in the middle of the woods, you get a little bit curious. I figured he wanted to see if he could find any lost treasures within. So he goes in, he pokes around the rubble but finds nothing. He's ready to turn back when he hears something softly pawing at the wall. He compared it to the sound of a dog scratching at a gate. Now, the man looks around and ends up finding a stairway leading down to a basement. He goes down and the pawing gets louder. Worse still, he hears a soul rending little whine, like a dog whining when without food. But try as he can't see any dog nor any door down there leading to some place some cruel bastard could have tied up an animal to leave it behind. The man turned to leave. He had his foot on the first stair, leading away when that whining turned to a sharp, loud bark, and then another, each bark louder and crueler than the last. The barking was coming from the other side of the far wall, but no door led to the other side. He could do nothing. He left, well aware that a dog must be dying on the other side, but what could he do? The way I figure, someone put something down there and left it behind. But a dog can't live down there for more than a few days without food or water. I don't know what the thing was, but it sounded strong. It sounded like a dog, but I don't know. Maybe someone walled in a dog down there, but the stones looked old. If that dog was still strong enough to bark like that, the walls would have been freshly built. But those stones, they looked ancient. But the odd part came as he was returning to his car. For the first time since coming to that forest, he could hear something alive in those woods. A growl. A low, rumbling growl. He told Michael he turned around to see a huge wolf standing under the trees, white fur as though a snowdrift has come alive and taken canine form. It had its head reared down, eyes poised on him, lips drawn, teeth bared. I've seen a lot of things living in these woods, but never a wolf. By the time the man got to his car, he could see wolves coming out from all sides, glaring at him from behind the trees. He did the only rational thing he could do. He got in his car and hightailed it out of there. Only after he put the road behind him did he notice that something had cut him. Not one of those wolves got near enough to hit me, and I don't know when it happened, but I was bleeding and I didn't even notice until I was out of those woods. I needed stitches and everything, but I didn't feel it until I got out of that place. Michael told me and a few other guys the whole story when we hung out, and naturally, it dragged us off to this road. Now, I thought the whole thing sounded cool myself. I love dogs, and I have a Siberian Husky at home who I adore, named Dante. I especially love wolves. Though dangerous, I couldn't pass down the opportunity to see a pack of them. Just in case, though, I brought a combat knife with me and one of my friends brought a pistol. None of us were legally allowed to carry the said weapons, but in this town, the law didn't really apply much. We go into the woods and, like the old man said, there was nothing. Just stretches of trees, rocks, overgrown roots, but not a single living creature. It was actually kind of bizarre. Without the sounds of life, you kind of focus on other parts of nature. I remember thinking how the way the gnarled roots ensnared the earth resembled the way maggots ride through rotting flesh. Pine needles and elm leaves covered up the sun. Even at noon, this place looked perpetually stuck in twilight. So we eventually find the castle. We actually almost passed it, but Michael happened to turn around at the right moment and found it to our rear. It was just like the man said. Nothing grows here, and everything was dead. The closer I get, the more I realize that this wasn't a castle though. It was more like a stone hut. There weren't enough fallen bricks here to indicate that this building went more than 2 stories tall. Probably someone used to live in these woods, like old settlers or something, I rationalized. But Michael didn't buy it, and then again, he probably didn't want to believe that it was just some old pilgrim's house. A castle sounded far more cool. So we go in, kicking around the bricks a little bit. One of my friends brought a spray can with him, and he tried to sign the inside of the walls. But for some reason, the paint wouldn't shoot out. The nozzle was just probably broken. I was the one to hear the scratching first. There's no way that thing is still alive, I remember saying as I led my friends down that stairway to the dark basement. We had flashlights with us, shining all over the barren walls of the subterranean chamber. Not only did we hear the scratching, but we heard a pitiful cry as well. There was an animal in pain down there. Hurt. It sounded like Dante sounded when someone stepped on his tail or foot, but only worse. I remember feeling something rise up in my throat as I searched desperately for some doorway to the other side of that wall. Just something. But we looked all around and it was like the old man said. No door led to the other side. The crying dog lived in a room with no doors. But Michael came prepared for that. He brought a sledgehammer. It took several swings to bring the wall down. The stones buckled in easily at first, and after a while though, his strikes lost their bite. 4 swings did the work of one of his earlier ones, but eventually, the wall gave. We went in, shining our lights on the inside of this room. I'm not gonna lie, I really didn't know what to expect. Part of me expected to see a wolf or some dog here, or even a ghost dog. But I didn't expect an emptied room with a rock sitting in the middle of it. The wreck had a sort of ribbon wrapped around it. It looked like a thin fabric, kind of like hemp. But none of us could cut it with our knives. Hell, the knives looked scratched up after even trying to split the ribbon. Someone had painted the walls with old ruins. It looked like Old German, and I had studied Beowulf in English class, so I knew what Old English looked like. The real Old English, which was basically the language of the Vikings who came to England. That's the closest thing I could compare this writing to. The ruins were written from the inside, so whoever had wrote them down had been inside this room with no doors, which either meant they died here or there was another way out. So we looked around and we looked along the floor for some trap door that might lead us out. We looked for some place where the dog or the writer could have escaped to. But we couldn't find any trap door. We did find an old hand though. It was a human hand, ripped off at the wrist. It hadn't even rotten yet. It just sat under the dust along the floor. But something had bitten it off. The maggots didn't even reach it yet. Honestly, if the ghost dog in the old ruins didn't scare us, that hand did. We got out of there. We didn't see any wolves in the woods or anything of that. But when we reached the car, we heard something deep in those woods howl. Something loud and angry. I didn't forget what we saw. Michael started cracking jokes, but none of us said a word. I just think he was trying to lighten up the mood. He even talked about going back there to check out the hand again. And I suppose he did try to go back, 'cause that's where the police found his body. They found him pulled over to the side of that road after his mom reported him missing. He was in his car, the doors locked. He had crashed into a tree. At first, people just thought he got drunk and killed himself in an accident. I wish that was what happened. But no, something had been in the car with him, some animal. The seats were clawed up and the steering wheel was twisted and ripped. Something had half eaten him. It clawed out his eyeballs and ripped open his throat. It unraveled his insides and left him strewn on his lap and under the gas pedal. He was dead long before the car ever hit the walls. But the odd part of it was this. No animal fur was found inside, nor were the windows shattered. There was no sign of entry or exit. It was as if an animal had appeared in his car and then disappeared, leaving no physical evidence that it had ever been beyond the marks of its claws and its fangs.